Hey, F50Woman audience. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we are here with Wally Miller, and she is a first generation college student. She's the daughter of an immigrant, and she is a self-made millionaire. I'm so excited to hear what she's going to share with us today. She is committed to helping high achievers reach their financial goals and design a life that they love. Wally she wasn't always a financial wizard, but now that she is committed to using her powers for good to help others like us and the younger generation take control of their finances. So thank you so much for being here, Wally.
I am super excited to be here chatting with you, Julia. I think for sure when we think about money matters, it can feel very overwhelming when you're thinking about budgeting and saving and wealth building. But, a lot of these conversations don't really happen in our household. So we learn about money indirectly. And sometimes the things that we learn indirectly can really shape our relationship with money for years and decades to come.
Sometimes consciously, but oftentimes unconsciously. So before we get onto that, because you said you're a first generation college student, you're the daughter of an immigrant, I want the audience to understand and to get to know you and your journey a little bit first. So tell us about you as a younger woman. Just tell us about you.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in New York City in the Bronx. And if you know anything about New York City, the Bronx is actually the poorest borough, right? So I wasn't living in like Upper West Side or anything like that. This was really, everyone around me had very similar financial situations, which tended to be like lower income, right? So I will say I didn't even really notice that we were any different until I left New York City, right? Until I left the city. And I realized how different we were. And also, when you look back at certain things, my family, we grew up where we had, back to school clothes at the start of the year, a pair of sneakers. Well, I'm from New York, so we say sneakers, maybe tennis shoes. We would have a pair of tennis shoes at the start of the year. And there wasn't a lot of extra, right? So, you would tell your parents what you wanted, or I would tell my parents what I wanted for Christmas. And I didn't always get that. I would get like a coloring book or a board game, or maybe if I was really lucky, I would get maybe one of a few things that I had asked for Christmas. But when you grow up in a community where everyone around you is kind of in the same social economic system, you don't really notice too many differences. Now, when I think back now, like I definitely acknowledge and realize like we were definitely low income. I won't say we were totally in poverty in that we always had food to eat. We had a roof over our head. Yes, the telephone, sometimes the light would get cut off. Sometimes we didn't have cable, so there were all of those things, but we had everything that we needed. Right. Sometimes we would get some of the things that we wanted.
Right. Okay. So you said that when you were growing up, you didn't really recognize the difference financially until you left. So when did that happen? Was it when you went to college? Was it you just decided to move? What was that like? How did that come about? And tell us about that transition and when you actually realized, wait a minute, what's happening here financially? Yeah.
No, for sure. Like most people, we didn't really talk about money, right? The only conversations I maybe overheard about money was that we didn't have it, right? Okay. So if I wanted something, it was like, no, we can't get that. We can't afford it. We don't have it, right? So I never learned like how to balance a checkbook or talk about investment or talk about budgeting. Like those were just conversations that we didn't have in my household. When I left New York City and I went to a predominantly white community school. We moved to Florida, actually. That was when I realized huge differences. I realized that some of the high school kids were getting cars for gifts. And I was like, what in the world is going on? They had houses that were like 4-bedroom houses. And, we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment and there was 5 kids and, parents. So there was definitely like, that was when I noticed like, okay, like something is, I'm a little bit different. Now, fast forward a little bit. I was fortunate enough to get a really good paying job a few years out of college.
Okay.
And I remember I was making about $30,000 a year. And by this point, I had left Florida because I did not like it. And I had graduated college and I was living in New York City and barely making ends meet. And I was earning about $30,000 a year. And if you know anything about New York City, that's not, I mean, it's really
I was going to say, yeah, New York.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. I was in my mid-20s when I got a job offer that offered me more than double what I was making in New York City. And so I left New York City and I moved to cross country to California. All the New Yorkers want to go to California. All the Californians want to move to New York. And it was at that point, it took me a while, but it was at that point that I realized a couple of things. One, I was making more money than my parents had ever made. And two, I had enough money to pay all of my bills and I still had money left over, but I didn't know what to do with it. It was at that point that I did what I thought was responsible, which was, okay, pay the bills, right? Make sure the rent is paid, groceries in the refrigerator, car note paid, student loan paid. And then I just shopped and I ended up buying a lot of things and sort of accumulating things. And this kind of goes back to how I grew up, where we had what we needed, but not the things that we wanted. And so in my mind, I had made it in that I could now buy all of the things that I wanted. I didn't have to just have one pair of shoes for the whole quote unquote school year. I could have options of shoes and clothing and handbags and all of this stuff. And so it really goes to the point that sometimes we think that if I just make a little bit more money, everything will be okay. But what ended up happening was, because I didn't know what to do, again, there was that lack of financial literacy. I just became kind of an impulsive shopper. I would go to Target to go buy laundry detergent, right? And then end up with like $150 worth of random home decor and clothing and like stuff that just went to mindless purchases.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter if you're making $40,000 or making $100,000, right? If you are making $100,000 and you're spending $100,000, you are not in that good of a place as somebody who's making $40,000 and spending $40,000. I would actually say if you're making $40,000 and you could put $1,000 away, you are richer than that person making $100,000 putting nothing away.
Isn't that true? Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm a little older and I'm really, really ready to have one pair of shoes, 2 suits for work, 3 shirts, and just be done with all of that, because what does it add up to? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also the whole thinking, it's really interesting to me that now minimalism is like kind of like the thing to do, which I will say I am not a minimalist, but I will say I'm a valuist. I went from being in my 20s, buying all the things just because I could. And now I only buy the things that I value most. Okay. And what I was valuing back then was quantity, right? It was like, I want, all the options. And now I value, like not spending money on things that don't really add value to my life.
Yes. Value added things. That's a really great way to put it. Find out what adds value, because there's a lot of nice, shiny stuff. So looking back, do you know, or have you talked to your family? Did they actually have a budget and they just didn't share it with you? Or did they also know they were just surviving?
It was all about financial survival, right? When you are a lower income household like this, there's no options for being mindless with your money. This is really like, you need to make sure the roof is going to stay over your head. Foods are going to be in the bellies of everybody who's in that household. And so it was really about survival. And for me, what I realized was that it always seemed like there wasn't enough money, right? So in my mind, when I was able to go from making 30,000 to like 65,000, and I had this extra money, I was like, I've made it. Like, this is successful. But then I had that aha moment when I realized a couple of things. One is, I don't know what triggers it, if it's a age or if it's work history, but I remember receiving a statement in the mail from the Social Security Administration, right?
Yes.
And they start to send you the earnings report. And I think it's maybe after 10 years of work history. So when I got this statement, it listed out how much money I had made in my life. And I remember adding up that money and I was like, I made how much money in my lifetime? And I realized I didn't have anything to show for it. Right. All I had to show for it was a closet full of clothes that didn't fit right, that I probably never even wore, that probably had tags on it. And I was like, oh my goodness, that was kind of a aha moment. And I actually encourage everybody, if you have not received this before or you haven't looked at it, you can access this for free. Social Security and Medicare taxes and obviously federal and income taxes, they're all taken out of, if you have a W-2 job, gets taken out of your paycheck. And you can have access to see how much money has been taken out. And you can just go to the Social Security Administration website. So that's S.gov. And sign up for a free online account. And when you sign up for that free online account, you can get your earnings report history and see what that looks like for you. Add up those numbers and see how much money have you made in your life. And then take inventory about, when you look around, is like, yep, that's about right. Or is it like, where in the world did that money go? So that was kind of one aha moment for me.
Okay. And so when you saw that, or after you saw that, or when did it happen that you got to how did the budget part come up? How did that happen where you actually started working your own system?
Yeah. So in my mind, I thought I was good with money because my bills were paid, right? And so many times when people say, oh, I have a budget, it's just that they list, they put out their bills that they have to get paid. And they're like, yeah, I have a budget. But the one step that was missing was the money that was left over once the bills were paid, right? So we have a list of all the things that need to get paid. And it's okay to have a list of wants, right? There's some things that I don't need to live, but make my life a little bit easier, maybe bring some added value or some joy to my life. And that is okay. That is not for me to determine or you to determine. You can figure out for yourself like what matters most to you. So a list of your needs, a list of your wants, and then make sure that when you take a look at that, is that reflected into the things that, that you value most, right? This is about aligning your spending with what you value most. And when I took a look to see how much money I had made, and I made a list of all my bills, and I was like, okay, once I pay off my bills, like I'm supposed to have X amount of money. And in that point, I think I was supposed to have like $300 left over every month. And I was like, I don't have $300 left over every month. And it was trying to figure out where was that money going. And so I started tracking and keeping kind of a diary, right? When we think about when we're trying to get on our fitness journey, what do they say? Like for a week, write down everything you put in your mouth. For me, it was that same thing. It was like doing that financial wellness tracking of every time I spent money, every time I went to the vending machine, every time I went to the bodega, every time I ordered takeout, every time I spent money. Where was I spending money? When I came home from Target, like, okay, how many of these things were things that I actually needed versus the things that I picked up because it caught my attention?
Right.
So that was sort of one of the things that I started doing, was just tracking. Now, I didn't do it for a long time, but I did do it for a while. And that was when I realized like, wow, I am spending a lot of money. And I wasn't buying expensive things, right? So it wasn't like I was spending, $300 on a dinner or, $150 on a pair of jeans. In my mind, I was good with money because I wouldn't ever spend $200 on a pair of jeans. I bought the $50 pair of jeans or the $40 pair of jeans, right?
Yeah.
But it was all of these little purchases were adding up, and they were basically kind of causing these budget leaks.
Yeah.
And so I began to track, and I did that for about a week or two and realized, wow, like I am definitely spending this money. And so I became more aware. The second thing that happened was that I loved the job that I had, but management changed. And when management changed, my ideal job went to like a nightmare.
Wow.
And I realized, wow, I can't just quit my job right now. I
Right.
am kind of stuck here because if I miss a paycheck, definitely 2 paychecks, I'm going to lose everything that I worked so hard for.
Yeah.
And that was another aha moment,
Okay.
realizing that even though I was making good money, I was I was stuck. I didn't have that financial freedom.
Right.
Yeah, I was totally trapped. I didn't have that freedom to be able to make decisions to say, you know what? I don't need to go to this toxic work environment. I had to go. I had to be in that situation because if not, I was going to lose what I had.
Yeah.
And so it was at that point that I realized that something needs to change, right? I'm spending money recklessly, mindlessly. And again, it wasn't that I was buying very expensive things. I was buying a bunch of little things that were adding up and just like causing me not to be able to have a good savings account. And I realized that essentially I was living paycheck to paycheck. If my paycheck didn't come in, I was going to be in big trouble. And so that was when I began going to the interwebs. I went to Google to try to figure out, what am I missing? What in the world am I missing? And that was where things changed for me.
Now I need to know what happened. What site did you hit on? What was it?
Well, so the first thing was that I read this like clickbaity article, and it was about a couple who had retired in their 40s.
Oh,
right?
I'm so jealous.
Yes,
Yes.
I know. Exactly. And I was like, what in the world? And so I read the article and I was fascinated because one of the things that I realized was that it was a couple. So they were a dual income household,
Right.
but he was making about $60,000 a year and she was making about $40,000 a year. So they had a 6-figure income, but it's $100,000. That's not like,
Right.
it's not like a huge
$500,000
amount. And they were also living in a very high cost of living area. They were living in Seattle. So this wasn't also that they had a rent or mortgage payment of like $600. Like their rent and mortgage was probably, maybe if not 2,000, it was pretty close to it.
Right.
So I started to read what they had done and being able to do that. And one of the things that I realized was that the extra money that I was spending on Target runs, Burlington Coat Factory, Nordstrom Rack, Ross, Marshalls, I could have been doing one of two things: saving money, putting money aside, which is incredibly important, right? And the other one was investing.
Okay.
And to me, in my mind, investing was gambling. I don't know about you, Julia, but I was like, investing is gambling. I don't want to lose my money. But I realized that there was a lot of jargon and a lot of complicated things out there that didn't need to be. And I started very simply. The first was really understanding and being more of a conscious shopper. Okay. So when I spent money, I was very intentional about it. And I said, okay, if I want to buy this outfit, it's going to cost me X amount of hours worked. Yeah. And I would think about it. Do I really want to work 4 hours to buy this outfit? Is it really worth, 6 hours of my time? And so I began equating the items that I wanted to purchase with the amount of energy I had to exert. Now, remember, I was thinking about this toxic work environment. I'm like, if I buy this, I'm gonna have to work 6 more hours
in this environment. Yeah.
Right. So that was something that I did. I became more intentional and more conscious. I went from mindless spending to an intentional shopper. Then once I was able to gain control of my expenses, because I think gaining control of your expenses is one aspect. And I think particularly for women, they tend to put financial advice on cutting expenses. You shop too much, use coupon clipping and things like that. Yes, that is important, but it's also about making more money. Let's make more money. So once I was able to reduce the expenses, the second part is to increase the income. And what I realized was that the money that I had left over, I first started putting money aside so that I built a savings account, because having cash on hand is incredibly important, right? We know life is going to happen. That tire is going to blow out.
Yep.
We know that car repair is going to happen, that home repair. Emergencies are going to happen. Create an emergency fund that feels sufficient for you. At the time, I didn't have any kids. So my emergency fund was a little bit less than somebody who has kids, for example, right? Somebody who has children might need a higher emergency fund. But once I put money aside in a savings account, earning a measly like 1% interest, but it was there as a safety net, then the extra money I was able to begin investing. And when my clients come to me, they all want to start investing because I talk about investing a lot, particularly on my Instagram. And people are like, I want to start investing. And my first question to them is, do you have access to like a 401k? Do you have a 403b? If you're a government employee or military, you might have something called the TSP or thrift savings plan. And so many people are like, yeah, I think I have one, right? And have no idea how to use that.
Right.
And here's a secret. One of the biggest things that we can do, and I like to use this term, is we need to learn how to cut the fat. And the fat stands for food, accommodation, transportation, and taxes.
Okay.
So what I say is we need to learn how to cut the fat, right? Cut costs when it comes to food, accommodations, right? Your living expenses, transportation, and your taxes. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by using tax advantage investment accounts. This is 401ks and such.
It always happens. As soon as you're taping, it always happens.
Yeah. So if we can focus on those things, I think it really makes the biggest of difference for sure.
Okay, very good. So I'm curious how the Gen Zers, younger generations, resonate with all of this you're telling them.
Oh yeah, particularly Gen Z. I think Gen Z is going to be one of the richest generations.
That's
right?
Good to hear. Yeah.
Because I think millennials, and I'm a millennial, millennials have sort of said, I'm tired of the status quo. Who says I have to work until the age of 65 or 70 until I have a good life?
Yeah.
And I think that because we have began to question the norm, Gen Zers are even questioning, like, wait a minute, how can I maximize the money that I'm earning right now? And I say it's about leveraging, right? Leverage the money that you make right now in order to build wealth. Yeah. And so with applications, apps, and things like that, that make investing so much easier to get into, I feel like the Gen Z population for sure is probably going to be one of the richest. I will give a little bit of caveat because I think, although I'm super excited about how easy investing is right now, I think that there's a lot of knowledge that is not coming along hand in hand with the investing.
Right.
So there are a lot of people getting into the markets, for example, who are not clear. They are not understanding. They don't have a clarity or a clear understanding of some of the decisions that they're making when they are investing. Yeah. And what worries me about that is that I feel like it can also frighten people, right, from getting into the market. If you invested in real estate in 2006 and 2007, and you lost the house, you probably are deathly afraid of real estate at this point, right? And that is one of the things that worries me a little bit, that there might be some people who can make a lot of money very fast in the stock market, but if they were to lose it, they might then kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, I never want to get into investing again. Right. And I think that there is, although there's risk to any type of investments, whether it's real estate or the stock market or businesses, right? If you're an entrepreneur, there's risk to it all, but there's a way to mitigate some of those risks. Right. And so I think that if we can learn how to do it in a smart way, and without taking unnecessary risks, right? Sometimes we think if we are giving up some risk, we're giving up the reward. No, there's a way to still have growth, right? There's still a way to build wealth while also mitigating the type of risk. And this is why I say the first thing I ask my clients when or people, potential clients who want to come to me, they're like, I want to get into the stock market. I'm like, well, did you know that if you put money into a 401k or 403b, you are investing and start to learn and understand what tools you have in front of you. And I would say I love a 401k because I know some people be like, oh, 401k, they're just going to steal your money, right? And it's like, again, that lack of understanding. Like, let's start to learn and understand how we can really use something like that to be able to plan for the future. I say that I'm a lazy investor. I don't have like 6 screens. I'm not a day trader. I'm not a swing trader. I am something called an index fund investor, which means that instead of trying to figure out what's the new up and coming company, I just buy an index, which simply means a basket of companies. So what I do is that I like index fund investing. And instead of trying to figure out which individual companies are going to be, kind of skyrocketing and like all of this stuff, is that I buy a basket of companies. And we've probably heard the Dow Jones is up 5 points, the S&P 500 is down. And what the S&P 500 is simply stands for the Standard & Poor's top 500 companies in the United States. Okay. So when you think about owning Google and Facebook and Amazon, they are all part of the S&P 500. And so I like to invest in things like a S&P 500 index fund. If I want to own Google and Amazon and Facebook and the top 500 companies, I just purchase an index fund. And it is one of the most simplest ways to go. And most 401ks, most workplace retirement accounts, you have access to something called either the total stock market fund or the S&P 500 fund. And this is how you can mitigate some of that risk when it comes to investing.
Okay. And so I know you help a lot of people. This is what you do, and you help people to get to be financially successful. How much of it is mental change they have to make, and how much is it behavior change?
Oh, yeah. I always say people like to start with the math, right? They want to start with the calculations and compound interest and debt and all of these things. And that is important. This is not to say that it is not important. But I would say the mindset matters more than the math. So much of our relationship with money, again, is formed from very young, things that we may have learned directly from our parents and sometimes indirectly, right? If there was tensions in your household about how there wasn't a lot of money, how scarce it was, we developed then a scarcity mindset. If you grew up where it was like, yes, money just flows to me, I attract it, it comes to me, then we then develop an abundance mindset. And even when I work with my clients, yes, we focus on those numbers because we need to, they are important, but so much of it is about focusing on the mindset, shaping, understanding, fixing, healing our relationship with money first. Because you could tell me I want to be a millionaire, but if you don't really believe that, it is never going to happen to you. And I will say, even for me, the word wealth wasn't a word that we used growing up. And I equated being wealthy with being rich, right? And I wasn't an actor. I wasn't an athlete. So I was like, I will never be rich. Right. But today, when I think about wealth, it is going beyond that financial security, right? It's like, I feel financially secure. I know I have food on the table. I'm going to have a roof over my head, but I also feel financially abundant, so that I know that it goes beyond financial security. It feels financially free. And even, you in your introduction, you said, I'm a self-made millionaire. What does that mean to me? When I first kind of discovered that, like, I was like sitting, looking at my portfolio. I had like a dirty t-shirt, a hole in my sock, right? And I was like, oh, okay, nice, right? It wasn't because it was like, I'm not going to now go out and buy XYZ thing. What that means to me is that I have a fully funded retirement, right? For example, I'm able to say, you know what, now that I have that, like, I don't have to worry about the day to day. And it took, and I will say, my husband and I are, I am married. So having a dual income household definitely helps,
Mhm.
but the number isn't what matters. It's
Mhm.
about the feeling and the peace that you have when
Yes.
it comes to being able to say, you know what, I know we are taken care of. And particularly in communities of color, we know it's not only about us either, right? Like we might
Wow.
be the ones who get that phone call in the middle of the night, like, I am stuck in XYZ place. I need a tow truck and I can afford one, right?
Right.
And being able to say, you know what? I have the money, I'm able to help you. Or
Yes.
being able to say, you know, my parents, for example, they've never told me that I'm their retirement plan, right? But
Right.
in a lot of ways, like I probably will be. And so
Mhm.
how can I use the wealth that we've built to be able to provide a good retirement for my parents when that time is to come?
Yeah.
Or, you know, if you have children, it's like, man, I had to work 2 jobs while I was in college. And yes, that taught me a lot. And I'm thankful for that experience, but I also wish I didn't have to work 2 jobs while I was trying to go through college.
Yeah.
And how can I help the next generation ease that up? We know that medical bills and
Yes.
student loan debt are really crushing that next generation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, your parents could get a degree with $10,000. Now we're talking about 40, 50, 60, $100,000
Yes.
worth of student loans. And so how can we build wealth so that our children don't have to take care of us, and so that we can help those who may not have the opportunity to help themselves, right? This isn't about like handouts or anything. This is about, you know what? I am able, I am capable, and I have learned how to build wealth in an easy way. And so I'm going to do this not just for me. I'm like, you know what? There's this meme kind of going around, is like poverty ran in my family until it ran into me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, yes, and amen. Like,
Yes.
I'm like, I want to change the whole financial legacy for my family so that poverty won't have to run through our veins anymore.
So I'm going to throw a question at you. For someone like me who's 50 or and over, I have kids. I sent them to college. Boy, oh boy, you wonder if you should even bother sending them to college. It's so expensive. But say someone like me who's in a situation where your debt is really big, you're older, you didn't do all these smart things as you were growing up. What would you advise them to do? And I asked that question because you were talking about teaching the younger generations. Even at our age, we can still learn financial intelligence, be financially intelligent, and then pass it on. We still have grandchildren to come. My children are millennials. They're changing their mindset, but I don't think I really taught them well about money. So, we could still learn things at our age that we can still pass down. What would you advise someone like me to do, or to start with, or to focus on?
Yeah, look, I wish financial literacy was taught in schools. Like,
Oh.
I didn't actually learn about this until I was in my 30s.
Mm.
And so I wish I would have known this, particularly because I started making really good money in my mid 20s. So
Early,
had
yeah.
I known, I would have been in a much different place. But
Mhm.
every generation will say that. If you learn this in your 30s, you're like, I wish I learned this in my 20s. If you learn
Yep.
this in your 50s, you wish that you would have learned this earlier.
Yeah.
But it's never too late to start making good decisions now, particularly because of student loans debt. I just actually, before our call today, I had somebody who was like, I have $300,000 in student loan debt.
Oh my
How do
gosh.
how do I begin to pay that off? Right. And this is not a mortgage, right? This is like student loan debt.
Oh, yes.
And it can feel very crushing. So it doesn't matter if you have $10,000 of credit card debt, right?
Yeah.
That can feel very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that I would do is know your numbers. So
Oh,
many
okay.
of us could really start.
Know your numbers. I like that.
So what does know your numbers mean?
Mhm.
So many of us are filled with overwhelm, guilt, and shame We don't open up those emails. We don't open up the bills. We don't look at the credit reports. We don't look at any of that stuff. And I want to say, like, the first thing you need to do is open them up, right? Like open up the accounts, figure out what is what. Understand how much money are you truly bringing in on a weekly, monthly, bi-weekly basis. Really understand that, because sometimes we will equate how much money we earn on a yearly basis to what we bring home. And it's like, no, Uncle Sam takes his money.
Yes, he does.
You pay medical insurance. So you really need to understand what your true income is and really understand how much money is going out as well. So really understand your numbers.
Okay. I love that. Understanding your numbers. Because I know there's been many times and I'm like, just don't open the email. Don't look at the statement. There's no point. It's just too big. But you have to know what you're dealing with. You can't ignore it. You have to know the sum, the total, the interest, the balances. Exactly. So really know your numbers, know what your true income is, know what your monthly expenses are, and know what your debt is, right? It's really important. How can you begin to tackle the debt if you don't even know how much you owe, right? So I would say start there. First, know your numbers. Once you know your numbers, really evaluate the amount of money that you're spending. I think one of the biggest issues people have is groceries. For example, they're like, oh, I think I spent like $400 on groceries. And when it comes to be, they're spending like $700 on groceries, right? Or, oh, I only go out, 3 times a month. I probably only spend, dining out maybe $200, and then come to find out they're actually eating out for lunch and ordering, coffees to go and doing all. So it's like, really understand how much money you're spending. The rules to building wealth is fairly simple. It's not always easy, but it is simple, right? It's spend less than you earn, make more money, and invest the difference, right? And the reason why I say invest is because when we think about interest rates right now, you can save your way to $1 million, right? Like you can do $1 million divided by how many years or how much money you can put aside away and figure out how much money you need to save. But that's going to take you a lot longer than letting the investment do the hard work for you, right? If you can begin to start doing that. And I will say, like, really understanding, again, know your numbers and reduce expenses where you can. And sometimes it's not an expense issue. Sometimes it's like, man, I can't cut anywhere else, right? So it's about what can I do to increase my income? And right now, I think one of the things I want to warn against is hustle culture, right? I think it's like hustle, hustle, hustle. I don't know about you, Julia, but I am not trying to kill myself in order to be able to afford the things that I want, but I am willing to work harder, and I'm willing to work harder. And how I could do that is, doing something as simple as, especially right now where we're in a time where so many employers are looking for work. We're in the time of the Great Resignation, right? The 4 million jobs are being lost or available almost every month since April, which is mind-boggling. The employees, we as the workforce, have more power than ever before to be able to negotiate salaries and be able to see who is willing to pay what we're worth and not be afraid about that. So negotiating salaries is incredibly important. Nice. So you mentioned the hustle culture, right? What do you think about residual income opportunities?
Love it.
Okay.
I love it. When we think about investments, you're going to either need a time investment or a money investment early on in order to create that passive income, right? So for example, if you want to write a book, it's going to take your time at that beginning, right? It's going to be a lot of hours for you to do research, the time to write it and edit it and format it. But then once that book is out there, it can create that passive income or residual income, right? So, or the same thing when we're talking about investing in real estate, right? It's going to take upfront money, but then once you have that upfront money, then it can continuously grow and generate passive income. When we're thinking about investments, it's going to require money upfront or time upfront, and maybe sometimes both. But if you can make a solid investment in the beginning, let it do its work. I like the stock market. I like passive investment when it comes to the stock market because I don't have a whole lot of time, but I do have a couple of $100 that I can start putting aside so that money could grow for me. And it's making money for me while I sleep.
Yeah.
Your situation might be different where you're like, okay, I have a little bit more freedom with my time. I don't have that much money. So what can I do right now? How can I invest my time right now so that it'll generate passive income in the future?
And you did talk about this being a time where the employee has the power to ask for what they're worth. What other financial lessons has the pandemic and this whole world situation taught us, if any?
Oh, so many lessons, right? I mean, when we think back, I don't know about your community and your friends and family, but when we think about March and April, like people who thought they had good, solid, stable jobs, now all of a sudden didn't have a good, solid, stable income anymore. It made a lot of people scared, right? So many of us who, had been in that paycheck to paycheck cycle realized the importance of like, whoa, if that paycheck stops and I have no money set aside for an emergency, what am I going to do? And so I think one of the things, and actually studies are showing this, that particularly in 2020, spending was down big time. Now, part of that was because we didn't have anywhere to go, right?
Right.
The world was shut down, right? Outside was closed.
Yes.
So there wasn't a lot of place to do that. But I think it also help people to see like, wow, I now have some extra cash. If you were lucky enough to work from home, I now have some extra cash that I was spending on miscellaneous things like eating out or shopping that now I have. And a lot of people actually were able to start saving some money. So I think that the pandemic really showed us, and I hope that this will be long lasting, but I think as humans, we have very short-term memories.
Yes, we do.
But I hope what it has showed us is that, look, it is okay. And I am a financial coach who does not believe in deprivation. I tell my clients, I don't really care how you spend your money. I don't. What I care about is what your financial goals are. And as your financial coach, I'm going to hold you accountable and remind you of that. Right? I want to hold you accountable to make sure that the way you're spending and using and utilizing your money is aligning with what you told me was important. Right? If having a healthy retirement so that you don't have to depend on your children is important to you, let's make a plan so that not only do you have a clear debt payoff plan, and some people don't like the term budgeting. I like to say, let's create a spending plan, right? Don't tell me what I can't do with my money. Tell me what I can do with my money.
I like it.
So I'm like, let's create a spending plan. And before investing, I would say, make sure you have money set aside in cash, that it's not meant to grow, right? That money is meant to be your safety net. Now, once you have that money set aside for savings, now it's time for wealth building. Now it's time to helping that money grow so that you could build wealth, not only for yourself, but also come to a place that you can build that generational wealth for the next generation, right?
Right. Okay. So I just have to ask you this question. What do you think about Bitcoin? This whole, and even they have online banks that don't have, I'm used to the bank with the building, you can drive up to it. Yeah. What do you think about that? So online banking culture and the Bitcoin, everything seems to be going invisible. Should we be afraid of that? Or I don't know, you tell me.
I think what we should be afraid of is getting into something we don't understand.
Good. Right.
Right. And I don't care if it's a stock market or real estate or cryptocurrency. If you don't have a good understanding, you are going to lose your shirt. Right.
Gotcha.
If you don't understand what you're doing. I believe that cryptocurrency is here to stay. And I believe cryptocurrency is going to be the future. The question is, will it be Bitcoin? Will it be Ethereum? Will it be all of these other different coins?
And I didn't even know about those.
Yeah, there's so many different types of cryptocurrency. Yes. So I believe that cryptocurrency is going to be the future. We just don't know which cryptocurrency it's going to be. One of the things that I will say is that I am an investor. Again, I do have real estate. I'm a real estate investor. I have real estate property. I invest in the stock market, and a small, tiny portion of my portfolio is in cryptocurrency.
Okay.
And I give that caveat because I think that diversification is really important, but I also think that risk management is important.
Yeah.
And when I began investing in cryptocurrency, I didn't fully understand it. So I didn't put money in there that I knew was going to be the make or break deal of my financial wellness, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so I said, you know what? I have a little bit of money set aside. So I'm going to just take a little bit of that money, put it aside, and I'm going to just test it out with Bitcoin. Okay. And I will say, because I let it go, it went up and down. I saw that drop to more than half of its value at one point. But I knew that it wasn't my make or break, right? It wasn't my retirement.
Right.
It wasn't my safety net. And so I tested it out while I understood it, right? Until I started to understand. And so I think that that is what's most important, right? If you're going to choose a sector, if you're going to choose an asset class, it's really important to just understand it. Now, if you want to just speculate on something, sure, fine, no problem. But just make sure the most important things are in order first. Make sure you have that savings account, you have that emergency fund, make sure you have your retirement fund, make sure if you're paying for your kids' college that you have that set in place. If you have plans to pay off your mortgage, make sure you have a plan for that in place. Right. Do those things first. And if you have, like dumpster fire money, if you would have said, okay, I could go to Atlantic City or Vegas, I'll just put it into cryptocurrency. Sure. No problem with that, and test it out.
Do you see your home as being an investment, or do you see that as, because, some people say your home is actually an investment. Some people see it as an asset and some people see it as a liability. How do you see your own personal home?
This is a great question. And I think some of your listeners right now are going to roll their eyes, right?
Okay.
I say that your primary residence might be an investment if you're generating income from it right now. So for example, when I purchased my first home, I was young, I was single. And so I had 2 roommates paying me rent, and I turned my primary residence into a passive income generating asset. That was how I generated income from it. That was how I made it a real estate investment. Okay. That being said, if you purchase a home, or if you purchased a home 10 years ago and you're living in that home right now and nobody's paying you to live there, it's not an investment. It's a lifestyle choice, and that is okay. Okay. Now, it can become an investment if you choose to sell it in the future. Right. But most people who buy their homes as a place to live. Right. And so I would not consider that an investment until you're generating income from it. It's not an investment. It's easy to turn it into investments. I've heard of people renting out their backyards, right? So that people can host baby showers and, small weddings in their backyards. Great. You're generating profit from it. Awesome. Right. Or places like Boston or San Francisco, if you have a garage, if you're so lucky to have a parking space, they're renting out their parking space so that primary residence is now generating income for them. But if you're not getting income from it, it can sound like an investment because you're like, okay, well, my home is up in value, but unless you're taking that money out, right? Unless you are going to sell it, when you sell it, that's when it becomes, and so it's very different than being a real estate investor, right? So a real estate investor will buy a property, get tenants, and the tenants pay the mortgage, that they're generating income from it. Right. I also don't believe, I think this has changed for so many, right? Because when we know that, particularly in communities of color, we have been hurt by redlining, we've been hurt by not having access to loans and things like that in the same ways that it has hurt our generational wealth for sure. But when we think about how other communities are using their home as an investment, then they are able to take out equities, or they're able to, like a line of equity or a home line of credit. They're able to sell that home and purchase another home for cash and not worry about it. So, I think that's where people are like, no, but your home is an investment. I'm like, who's paying for you to live there? It's not an investment until you sell it. And
Right.
it could be an investment. It could become an investment when you sell that property. It's a lifestyle choice, and that's
Right.
okay, right? That's
Yeah.
okay.
That's that other mental shift. Yep. How you're thinking about it. Because I know when I first heard that concept, I was like, what? My house is an investment. I don't care what you say. But then when you really think about it, and we've been in our house for a long time, things break, fall apart. So I don't know. The value is sort of going down as we live in it.
I
Even
mean,
that alone.
one would hope, yes, that as the home ages,
Mhm.
yeah, there are things that need to be replaced. But you would think that, if you purchased a home in, in the year 2000, that home
Mhm.
today would be worth more than you did when you purchased it.
Right.
So it's nice to look at that. But until you're selling it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And actually, the stock market works the same way, right? You
Mhm.
can have a portfolio or an investment that has gone up, you invested $1,000 and now it's up to $10,000. Well, you didn't make that profit until you sell it, right?
Good point.
So it's the same thing. You have a $10,000 portfolio, but did you sell it yet? If you
Yeah.
didn't sell it, it's not
Right.
guaranteed until you actually do it. And the same thing for the house.
I think my backyard's too small to rent, but I'm gonna put some thought to that.
Let's
Rent
get
some rooms,
creative.
Airbnb, where we were thinking, lots of things we can do. And so you teach your clients some of those things as well when it comes to home ownership, because that's a great idea for my children. If you purchase a home, rent it out, rent some rooms out, or rent the second level, get a duplex or something. So turn it into where you don't even have to pay rent anymore. Your mortgage
Yes.
gets paid.
So there's this whole term called house hacking. Have you heard this term before?
No, I have not.
And this is where you hack your house, right? So this is essentially what one of the things that I did. Now, I did not have like a duplex or quadplex. I had a 3-bedroom home.
Right.
I purchased this home for me and my dog. It was just me and my dog, right? I was like 28 years old when I bought this house. But I realized I'm like, I have these 2 empty bedrooms and a bathroom. I had a friend who's looking for a place, blah, blah, blah. And so I just started charging her rent. And then I still had another bedroom that I did not need that was sitting empty. And so I rented the 2 bedrooms out. Now, I will say that as people get older, they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to live with roommates. And look, I get that, but you also have to see how much do you want to reach your financial goals. Right. And there is a way to do it. You could also do something like a short term, right? You can also do something like you mentioned, like Airbnb, or when you are gone, if you are one of those people who has the luxury of being able to take 2-3 weeks of vacation and you're like, I'm not in the home anyway.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and rent it out so that other people might be able to use it. These are just kind of getting creative with that. Or if you have space, right? I think one of the things that I've heard recently, particularly here in New York City, where space is very valuable. If you have a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment and you're not using that 1 bedroom or half of the 1 bedroom and somebody wants to pay you to be able to create the content that they need, could you imagine what happened during the pandemic and you're trying to work from home and you have kids and a spouse and dogs and all of this stuff happening. And it's like, I just need a place to go for 3 hours so that I can do some focused work. And you have that space available. Yes, do it.
Nice. I love that. So what is next for you? I know you're coaching people on finances, and are you still working sort of the 9 to 5 type deal too? And what's next for you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. My husband and I are on something called a FIRE journey. FIRE stands for financially independent, retire early. And so our plan is to be able to retire in our early 40s. What early retirement means to us might be very different than for some people. I am not one who is going to sit around and not do anything.
Right.
But I like using the term being work optional, being able to take on projects or clients in the way that without it being dependent on whether or not I'm going to survive that month, right? So I could say, you know what, I feel like taking a couple of clients on this month, or I want to focus more on entrepreneurship or on other things. So I love this whole work optional this whole work optional idea, right? I have the option to
Yeah.
work. If I want to work, only from January to June, and then the next 6 months be totally free, have time freedom, I'm all for that. And how I help my clients will come to me for different reasons, right? Sometimes it will be to have a debt payoff plan. Sometimes it's like, I need to reach my financial goals,
Yeah.
or I want to be financially independent. I can't imagine retiring at 65. Like, I want to be able to be retired by the time I'm in my 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
So every person will kind of be a little bit different. So what's next for my husband and I is we're hoping to be work optional in the next couple of years.
I like work optional. I want to be work optional. I don't care if it's when I'm 60. I'm ready. I'm ready to make the sacrifice.
Yeah. So we should talk off air for sure.
Yes.
And get a plan for you, because I think so many people, like, the math is simple, right? To getting understanding how much money you need in that nest egg and how much money you need to generate passively is the easy part. Mm-hmm. What can be a little bit hard is when it comes to your mindset, right? Yeah. Like, are you willing to make these type of sacrifices and make these type of lifestyle decisions today, so that you're not forfeiting what you're going to need in the future? Yeah. And also finding that balance, right? Because I don't think it's about eating rice and beans today so that you can have a nice, great life in the future either. Right. It's like, how can I balance what I want today, mm-hmm. live a full and rich life today, yeah. without forfeiting what I'm going to need in the future? Right. How can I do both?
Yes. Yes. I am really scared for you to see what my numbers look like, because you might run away and say, sorry, Julia, I can't help you.
No, not at all. Like I said, I had somebody come to me with $300,000 worth of student loan debt. Yeah. And obviously their journey is going to look different than somebody who has no debt at all. Yeah. But again, somebody who has $300,000 of student loan debt is probably making a little bit more money than somebody who doesn't have any student loan debt at all. So it's also kind of thinking about that. How can you leverage the income that you're making right now, mm-hmm. in order to build wealth? And what are some of the steps that you can make? And how long do you have to retirement? Somebody who is 25 years old and is like, I want to retire early at 45. They still have 20 years worth of investing, right? Versus somebody who might be 50 and is like, look, I want to retire by the time I'm 60 or 65. How can we do that? The journey is going to look different, but they may not have student loans anymore, right? So it's like, depending on where you start, depending on where you are, is going to dictate the plan that you can create for you. So nothing scares me.
Okay.
Every situation is different. And it's just about finding out what is the plan that is going to work best for you.
Okay. Awesome. I feel better. So is there any book that you would advise women to read?
So many great books. Okay. I'm going to start off with the book that changed my life when it came to investing, because it made it so simple for me. It's a book by an author called J.L. Collins. He's an older gentleman, and he wrote this book as a way to get what he had learned about investing mm-hmm. to his daughter. The book is titled A Simple Path to Wealth. Okay. So The Simple Path to Wealth is a fantastic book. It really helped me to understand that investing didn't have to be complicated. Good. Another book that I would recommend is a book by Bola Sukumbi. Mm-hmm. She wrote a book called Clever Girl Finance. And it talks about how, everything from budgeting and saving and early money management skills. So those two books, I think, can really, really make a difference for sure.
Yeah, I like that. Finance seems so complicated, and I have run from it for years. I'm like, honey, you just deal with that. I don't even know. But it's so essential in just being able to be free and feel like you can make choices.
Yeah. And they don't teach this stuff in school, right?
No.
They don't teach this stuff in school. So we have to try to figure it out on our own. Should I hire a financial advisor? Should I hire a CFP? What should I do? Yeah. And I'm like, look, finance, you don't even have to hire me. You don't need a financial coach. Right. But just like when we are thinking about financial fitness and physical fitness, you don't need a personal trainer. Right. But when you have a personal trainer who's going to develop a plan that's specifically tailored to you, mm-hmm. and not only a plan, because there's some really great plans out there that you could buy or even get for free, mm-hmm. but it's about holding you accountable to it. That is the difference. And so whether or not you need a financial coach, I would say, I don't think anybody needs a financial coach, but you need to decide for yourself, are you going to be able to hold yourself accountable to the goals that you want?
Yeah.
If you're like, I've tried this so many times, I've downloaded the apps, I've read the books, I know what to do, it still scares me, then that might be when you want to hire somebody to help you along the way and make sure to hold you accountable, and so that you understand finance is personal, like personal finances is personal, and it's going to be different for everybody. And what worked for me may not work for you. So trying to understand, and here we go with the money mindset and your relationship with money, that is going to be key to your success.
Thank you so much. This is such great food. Just knowing your numbers, changing your mindset to money. And it's sort of goes along the lines of some of the things that I say in the podcast about knowing your biography, understanding where you came from, what you dealt with. Financially, it's the same thing. Understanding, what was I taught? What do I know? What do I need to learn? Who can help me? And that it is even possible. Because even when I read that you're a millionaire, I'm like, I'm never going to be a millionaire. That's crazy. But it's so possible.
Well, Julia, I was going to say, with that attitude, saying I'm never going to be a millionaire, I have to say you're never going to be a millionaire, right?
Yes.
But you need to change that. I never thought I was going to be a millionaire, right? I never thought I was going to be wealthy. And it wasn't until I understood how easy it was to build wealth. Like, even when I talk about investing, I thought only rich people invested.
Yes.
And what I was missing was, okay, in order to be wealthy, you have to learn how to invest. You have to understand. And again, I'm not only speaking about the stock market, whether it's real estate or entrepreneurship, like, you have to understand how to invest, and you have to believe that it is possible for you. I remember a few years ago, my husband and I were talking, and I asked him, I said, did you ever think that you could be a millionaire? Now, this was before we have reached that milestone.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah. And I'm like, what? Like,
really?
I never thought that was a possibility. And so, like, shaping that idea, but I think with knowledge comes power. If you don't know how to do it, then it can seem so foreign.
Yeah.
Even if you would have told me 10 years ago that I would have reached this milestone, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah.
Because I had to understand it first.
Yeah.
And so, Julia, if you want to be wealthy, however you want to define wealth, you can get there with a plan. You want to be a millionaire, and people are like, oh, but millionaires, one of the things that frustrates me, people are like, $1 million ain't nothing. I'm like, do you got $1 million? No. Okay.
After you get it, then tell me.
Right. Then tell me. But it's like, okay, well, if that milestone of $1 million, because it's just like a big number, right? That's 7 figures, right? So if it's like, okay, let's get to the first 10,000. Let's get to the first 100,000. And let's take it step by step, the same way we do. And I always equate it to like physical fitness, right? Don't worry about trying to lose 75 pounds. Like, let's lose the first pound, right? Let's lose the first 5. Let's do that first. And then you learn the habits that it takes to be physically well, to have a physical wellness. Same thing. You'll learn to have financial wellness, right? I told you, I was an impulsive shopper. That didn't change from one day to the next. Like, I wish I would say like, oh yeah, I saw how much I was spending, and then I stopped. It took me a few months to really understand why I was spending money in the way that I was spending, and why it was so hard. Have you heard of a no spend challenge?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So there's how you have like sober January and all these things.
Right.
And so basically a no spend challenge, and you can do it for 7 days or 30 days. It's when you don't spend money on anything outside of your needs. You only spend money on the most essential things. So like food, you spend money on groceries, you spend money on your rent, but you don't spend any money. I failed at no spend challenges over and over again. I couldn't do it. Because sometimes right when I thought I was good, I was like, okay, I haven't spent any money outside of the essential items. I would do that for 2 days. And then all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, look at this book. Ooh. And I'm like, why did you buy that? Right? Like there was no reason that I needed to buy it right then and there. If I wanted a book, I could have borrowed it from the library. Right.
Yes.
So it took me quite a few months to really understand and to sort of rein in that spending. Because a lot of it, money isn't good or bad.
Yeah.
Money is neutral. It's
Yeah.
simply a tool, but it's laden with emotions. And we got to understand the behaviors, the habits, the emotions that we have attached to money in order to gain control of it.
That's a very good point, that it is neutral. We have a lot of emotion attached to it. We just don't realize that it's there. As you said that, I'm like, it is. It's like you said with the books. I'm like, oh gosh, I got to read that book. Where? And then I go on and buy it. And it's so easy to purchase. Every month you buy $10 books. Right. 4 times.
It's so funny because I think about now with like subscriptions, like people are like, yeah, I've cut the plug. I'm not paying $80 in cable anymore. But then when you add up all the subscription services, I'm like, you know what's going to happen? Just like right now, people are like, I don't need a package to watch all of these channels I don't watch anymore. Sooner or later, people are going to be like, wow, did you know we could bundle it together and call it cable? So it's like,
oh my gosh, yes.
You're not paying $80 or $100 to cable, but when you add up your Disney Plus, your HBO Max, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, like all of these different things, you're paying the same amount.
You might as well go back to your cable. Yeah. Yes. I am actually now at the urgings of my husband, writing down all the little $12.99, $13.99. It seems simple until you have 20 of them every month.
And they get you with that. I'll give you one little hack that my husband and I do. We pause our subscriptions. And so we have Hulu for 4 months. We watch everything that we could watch until we get tired of it. Then we pause that. And then we're like, all right, reactivate Netflix.
Yeah.
And we watch Netflix for 3 or 4 months and like, okay, time to go back to Hulu. Because when we think about it, there's no time that we don't have the time to watch everything on each of them, right? So why are we paying paying for Hulu and Netflix when it's like, I could wait 3 months for watching them. So we do have the subscriptions, right? So it's not like, I'm like, don't get Hulu, don't get Netflix, but do you really need Netflix and Hulu and HBO and all these things all at the same time?
Every single month.
Every single month.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Please let us know how the audience can get in touch with you after the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. It's been a fantastic conversation. And I hope something that I have said today has really resonated with people and encouraged people to, gain control of your finances. It's okay. We didn't learn this stuff in school, but it's not too late. It's not too late to have a different path in your finances and really go beyond just stable, right? Being financially stable and being financially secure. Like it's really time to financially thrive. I am most active on Instagram, but you can also visit my website, which is financiallythriving.com. And my Instagram is financially thriving.
Nice. Thank you so much, because I am so ready to thrive financially. So thank you for sharing all of your insights. And please, everybody, hook up with Wally offline, because I know I've been on every diet on the planet and I definitely need a coach on that area. And at this point, having credit card paid off and on and off and on all of my life, I'm ready to be done. I'm over it. So thank you again. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
Absolutely. Have a good one, Julia.
Thanks.